Welcome to Bioscience class. Assalamu alaikum, dear students. Yesterday we discussed about sexual reproduction and its types. Now today we are going to discuss sexual reproduction in flowering plants. Sexual reproduction takes place by the combination of reproductive cells which are known as germ cells, and in sexual reproduction there two parents are involved, male and female. A male gamete that fused with a female gamete to form a new cell which is called zygote, and this zygote then grows and develops into a new organism. These gametes, these are sometimes also called germ cells, and most जो plants है that reproduce by asexual method, but there are flowering plants which reproduce by sexual method. And this sexual reproduction in plants that happens through flowers, and the flowering plants, they are known as angiosperms. What are angiosperms? एंजियोस्पर्म्स क्या होते हैं? वो प्लांट्स जिनमें जो सेक्स ऑर्गन्स होते हैं, दे आर कैरीड विद इन द फ्लावर्स, और जो उनमें सीड्स होते हैं, दे आर एनक्लोज्ड इन ए फ्रूट, एंड सच प्लांट्स दे आर नोन एज एंजियोस्पर्म्स. ठीक है, दस हम बोल सकते कि जो रिप्रोडक्टिव पार्ट ऑफ फ्लावर इन दिस प्लांट है दैट आर फ्लावर्स. ठीक है, thus we can say जो सेक्स ऑर्गन्स और रिप्रोडक्टिव ऑर्गन्स प्लांट के होते हैं वो क्या होते हैं? फ्लावर्स. और जो फंक्शन होती है फ्लावर की, इसकी क्या फंक्शन होती है? द फंक्शन ऑफ फ्लावर दैट इज टू मेक मेल एंड फीमेल gametes and to ensure that fertilization will take place to make new seeds for the reproduction of plant. And the sexual reproduction, that's most common method of reproduction in flowering plants, or we can say angiosperms. And now let us see what are different parts of flower. जो मेन पार्ट्स ऑफ फ्लावर है वो है essential whorls and non-essential parts of flower. Essential whorls or parts of flower are male reproductive part of flower and female reproductive part of flower. Male reproductive part, that is androecium, and female reproductive part, that is gynoecium. ठीक है, और जो फ्लावर के हैं और बाकी सारे पार्ट्स होते हैं, and these are known as non-essential parts of flower, like sepals and petals are non-essential whorls, or we can say parts, because they do not take part in reproduction. ये भी फ्लावर के पार्ट्स होते हैं, इनकी भी अपनी फंक्शन होती है, but these do not take part in reproduction. sepals की क्या फंक्शन है? They protect the inner delicate wall during bud condition and also performs photosynthesis if they are green in color. और जो petals होते हैं वो होते हैं colored part of flower and they attract insects for pollination. और जो है androecium and gynoecium, they are essential reproductive parts of a flower. Androecium जो है, that's the main reproductive part, sorry, androecium that produce that's male reproductive part of a flower, and it produces pollen grains which it produces pollen grains that contains male gametes, and जो gynoecium है, that's female reproductive part, and it produces ovules which are female gametes or female sex cells. ठीक है, और जो फ्लावर्स है ये बाइसेक्चुअल भी हो सकते हैं, यूनिसेक्चुअल भी हो सकते हैं. बाइसेक्चुअल फ्लावर्स हम उनको कहते हैं कि जिनमें बोथ एंड्रोशियम और गायनोशियम एक ही फ्लावर में प्रेजेंट हो, और जो यूनिसेक्चुअल फ्लावर्स होते हैं उनमें या मेल रिप्रोडक्टिव पार्ट होता है या फीमेल रिप्रोडक्टिव पार्ट. ठीक है, लाइक हम यूनिसेक्सुअल फ्लावर्स में हम एग्जांपल दे सकते हैं पपाया की और वाटरमेलन प्लांट्स, दे आर यूनिसेक्सुअल फ्लावर्स. अगर हम बाइसेक्सुअल की बात करेंगे, इसमें हम दे सकते हैं एग्जांपल हिबिस्कस और मस्टर्ड प्लांट्स, बिकॉज they contain both female and male reproductive part in same flower. and individual member of androecium, that is known as stamen. Thus we can say stamen जो है it's a male reproductive part of a flower, and जो carpel है that is female reproductive part of flower, और जो stamen है इसके फर्दर टू पार्ट्स होते हैं एंथर और फिलामेंट, और जो कार्पल है इसके भी फर्दर थ्री पार्ट्स होते हैं स्टिग्मा, स्टाइल एंड ओवरी. Let us see towards structure of flower. Here you can see this is a flower and you can see different parts of flower like these yellow colored, these are known as petals of flower, or we can say colored part of flower, and this is you can see pistil or we can say carpel. This is female reproductive part of flower, and this is male reproductive part of flower, that is stamen. Okay, and these sepals, what are sepals? These are small green leaf like structures, and इनकी क्या function है? They protect the flower in its initial stage when it is in the form of a bud. And here you can see ovule, you can see stalk, you can see receptacle. What is receptacle? Receptacle is a base of flower to which all parts of flower are attached. ठीक है, और जो ये है sepals, you can say these are green leaf like structures in the outermost circle of a flower. And जो sepals हैं when they are taken together they are known as calyx. ठीक है, और जो petals है you can see this yellow part of flower, yellow colored. These are yellow ही नहीं हो सकते, it varies in different flowers, some are red, some pink, white, yellow. ठीक है, और these are colorful parts of a flower. और जो petals होते हैं they lie inside the sepals, और जो petals है when they are taken together they are known as corolla. और जो फंक्शन ऑफ पेटल्स है इनकी क्या फंक्शन होती है? दे अट्रैक्ट इंसेक्ट्स फॉर पॉलिनेशन and they protect the reproductive organs which are at the center of a flower. Then stamen, here is stamen, this is male reproductive part of a flower, the little stalks with swell-on tips you can see here. And this stamen, it is the male reproductive part of a flower, and इसके जो है इसकी जो function है it produce pollen grains. And this stamen, it's further made up of two parts you can see here, anther, this swell-on end, and this filament. ठीक है, और जो ये pollen grains होते हैं they contain male gametes or male sex cells of a plant, and we can say male gametes of a plant they are made in the anther of a stamen. ठीक है, and second this is you can say pistil or carpel, it is a female reproductive part of a flower, and this carpel that's further made up of three parts, stigma, style and ovary. And जो top part of carpel that is known as stigma, and stigma की क्या function है? It helps in receiving pollen grains from the anther of a stem during pollination. क्योंकि जो stigma होता है ये sticky होता है, और जो pollen grains होते हैं they stick to it. And जो middle part of carpel है that is style, and style जो होता है it is a tube which connects stigma to the ovary. और जो swell-on part you can see here at the bottom of this carpel, that's ovary, और ovary की क्या function है? It makes ovules or we can say female gametes and stores them. ठीक है, thus we can say these are different parts of flower. Here मैंने आपको अभी भी बोला कि इसमें जो essential parts होते हैं और whorls और non-essential whorls. Essential whorls means which takes part in reproduction like pistil and stamen, और जो non-essential whorls है वो हम देख सकते हैं receptacle, petals and sepals. Now we will see how reproduction takes place in plants. The process that first it takes place through pollination. What is pollination? Pollination क्या होता है? The process of transfer of pollen grains from anther to the stigma of a flower. Pollination is a process in which male sex cells that are transferred from male reproductive part of a flower, that's anther, to the stigma of other, to the stigma of a flower, to female reproductive part of a flower. Thus we can say pollination में क्या होता है, इसमें क्या होता है, जो मेल सेक्स सेल्स हैं organs, how they are transferred to the female reproductive part of a flower. ठीक है. Thus we can say pollination is said to take place when pollen grains are transferred from anther to the stigma of a flower. And जो ये pollination है, how it is done by insects, it is done by birds, it is done through wind, it is done by water. और जो ये pollination है, इसके दो types है, autogamy and allogamy. What is autogamy? Autogamy is self pollination. What is self pollination? सेल्फ पॉलिनेशन में क्या होता है, जो ये पोलन ग्रेन्स होते हैं बेटा, ये ट्रांसफर होते हैं फ्रॉम एंथर टू द स्टिग्मा ऑफ सेम फ्लावर. When pollen grains are transferred from anther to the stigma of same flower or another flower of same plant, अगर एक ही फ्लावर के स्टिग्मा से, ये एंथर से पोलन ग्रेन्स ट्रांसफ़र होते हैं टू द स्टिग्मा ऑफ सेम फ्लावर, या पोलन ग्रेन्स ट्रांसफ़र होते हैं एंथर ऑफ फ्लावर टू द स्टिग्मा ऑफ सेम फ्लावर ऑफ द, टू द स्टिग्मा ऑफ another flower of the same plant, that is known as self pollination. ठीक है. और क्रॉस पॉलिनेशन में क्या होता है, जो पोलन्स होते हैं वो ट्रांसफर होते हैं फ्रॉम एंथर ऑफ वन फ्लावर टू द स्टिग्मा ऑफ अनदर फ्लावर. दिस मीन्स एक प्लांट के फ्लावर के एंथर से जो पोलन ग्रेन्स ट्रांसफर होते हैं टू द स्टिग्मा ऑफ फ्लावर ऑफ अनदर प्लांट. ठीक है. दैट इज व्हाट इज नोन एज क्रॉस पॉलिनेशन. और जो how pollination takes place, when suppose when an insect sits on a flower of a plant for sucking its nectar, जो pollen grains होते हैं वो क्या होते हैं, that sticks to the body of insect, and when insect sits on another flower of same similar plant, the pollen grains sticking to its body are transferred to the stigma of another flower. ठीक है. Thus we can see जो insects होते हैं, they transfer pollen grains from anther of flower to the stigma of flower, and this is how pollination takes place. Pollination आपने ये याद रखना है कि it is simply transfer of pollen grains from anther to the stigma of flower. ठीक है. Now we will see how fertilization takes place, how reproduction takes place. Reproduction, fertilization क्या होता है? Fertilization is when male gamete present in pollen grain when it joins with the female gamete. How it takes place? This happens as follows. For example, in flowering plants, after pollination, जो pollen grains when they germinate on the stigma surface of carpel or pistil and generate two male nuclei. ठीक है. जो पोलन ग्रेन होता है when it falls on the stigma of the carpel, when it falls on the stigma of this female reproductive part of flower, ये burst होता है and it grows a pollen tube downwards towards the style, towards the female gamete in the ovary. जब ये female gamete पे, female reproductive part पे उसका जो upper part है वो क्या होता है, stigma. When these pollen grains, when they fall on the stigma of the carpel, it bursts and it grows a pollen tube which moves through this style into the ovary of a flower. ठीक है. फिर क्या होता है इसके बाद, जो ovules होते हैं, ओव्यूल होते हैं, they have egg cells and they are female reproductive cells of a flower. और जो जब ये मेल गेमेट when it moves down the pollen tube, जो pollen tube है it enters the ovule in a ovary. ठीक है. when it enters in the ovary, when it enters into the ovary, जो pollen tube का टिप होता है that bursts, और जो मेल गेमेट इसमें है that comes out of a pollen tube. और ओवरी में क्या होता है, जो मेल गेमेट ऑफ पोलन इट combines with the nucleus of a female gamete in the ovule and it forms a fertilized egg which is known as zygote. And In this way जो fertilization है that takes place in these flowers. Like you can see here, when pollen grain, when it sticks to the stigma, it grows a pollen tube that moves through the style and reaches the ovule of a flower, and when it reaches into the ovule of the flower, this pollen tube it bursts, and जो male gamete इसमें होता है that comes off this pollen tube and it fertilizes with the with female gamete that is present in the ovule to form a fertilized egg which is known as zygote. ठीक है. And when अब जब ये zygote बनता है और we can say fertilized egg, फिर then it divides several times to form an embryo within the ovule. और जो ये ovule होता है, it develops a tough coat around it and it converts into the seed of a plant. ठीक है. और जो eggs होते हैं इस ovules में, जो ovary में present होते हैं, they become seeds. और जो ovary of flower है that develops and becomes a fruit. ovary of flower जो है that develops into a fruit, और जो ovules होते हैं that develops into a seed. ठीक है. और जो other part of flower होते हैं like sepals, petals, stem, stigma, style, they dry up and fall off and only the ovary is left behind. ठीक है. और thus we can say जो ये seeds होते हैं, they are the reproductive unit of a plant which can be used to grow a new plant. The seed plant जो होता है, seed जो होता है इसमें होता है baby plant or we can say embryo and food for the baby plant. और जो part of the seed which contains the stored food for the baby plant that is known as cotyledons. ठीक है. उनको हम क्या बोलते हैं, कॉटलीडन्स. और जो बेबी पार्ट प्लांट का जो पार्ट होता है सीड में विच डेवलप्स इनटू शूट विद लीव्स दैट इज नोन एज limule, and the part which develops into a root that is known as radicle. और जो बेबी प्लांट होता है बेटा that is which is present inside a seed is in it is inactive state or we can say dormant state. inactive stage में रहता है when metabolism almost stops, and when the seed gets suitable conditions like water, air and warmth, it germinates to form a new plant. ठीक है. In this way we can see जो parent plant है that reproduce more plants like itself by forming seeds through flowers. This is how sexual reproduction takes place in plants. Thus you remember कि जो flowers होते हैं वही होते हैं reproductive part of a flower, because इनमें ही क्या होता है male reproductive part and female reproductive part. और when fertilization takes place वहाँ क्या होती है, there takes place the formation of fruits and seeds. और जो only ovary is left behind which is the fruit of a flower. और जो उसमें seeds होते हैं they are the reproductive unit of a plant which can be used to grow a new plant, because when these seeds when they are in dormant state and when they get favorable conditions or we can say suitable conditions, they germinate and forms a new plant. ठीक है. In this way sexual reproduction takes place in flowering plants. Thank you.